Okay, this tutorial is about how European settlement happened in the Chesapeake region in the late 1500s and into the 1600s. Now, just so we're clear about what we're talking about, the Chesapeake region is located right here. This is the mouth of Chesapeake Bay. So when we talk about the settlement of the Chesapeake, we're talking about people settling in modern day Maryland, modern day Virginia, that general area, along the mouth and the shorelines of the Chesapeake Bay. Now, on this particular map, the Chesapeake Bay would be located right here. But before we get too far into this, let's take a look at this map as a whole and understand that even though you see a lot of settlements here, this is a later map, there originally were only 3 outposts. The first one, once again, was in the Chesapeake region right here, and it was known as Jamestown. Now, it's not specifically on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay. As you can see here, the modern Chesapeake Bay goes all the way up near modern-day Washington, D.C. But it was located on the Chesapeake nonetheless on one of the side rivers at a bend in the river right here. Jamestown was established by the English in 1607, originally as a fort, simply to protect the settlers against Native American attacks. Eventually, a town would grow around the outside of the fort, and Jamestown would become bigger. So once again, you've got 3 major outposts originally, even though this later map shows a bunch more. You have Jamestown located right around here, and then you also have Quebec, which if you look at the year, was founded in 1608, just 1 year after Jamestown. Now Quebec looks like this today, as you can see here. And it was originally founded by Samuel de Champlain, who was also known as the father of New France. Once again, Champlain settled Quebec in 1608, 1 year after the settlement of Jamestown. Now, if you look at the years here, you can probably make out the 3rd major outpost that existed around the early 1600s. Santa Fe, although it's listed on the map here as 1609, it was actually settled in 1610. As you can see here, the architecture in Santa Fe is much different than in some of the other places you would see in Jamestown or in Quebec, but it was a major Spanish outpost that existed there. So once again, by the early 1600s, you have 3 major outposts, although this map shows you a lot of later settlements as well, established by 3 major empires. One by the English at Jamestown in 1607, one by the French, established at Quebec in 1608, and one by the Spanish Empire, established at Santa Fe in 1610. Now, as a result, this would lead to an imperial rivalry between England and Spain, and eventually a little bit between France and those two as well. England really hadn't started with major ambitions to set up colonies. As a matter of fact, they had been Spain's ally for the first half of the 1500s. So right off the bat, there really was no beef between Britain and Spain. The British and the French had always not liked each other, but Britain and Spain didn't really have any major problems. At least that was until the Protestant Reformation came about. Now, we'll talk more about the Protestant Reformation and what that was in future lessons, but all you have to know right now is that the Protestant Reformation pitted Catholics against Protestants. And that meant that if a monarch was Catholic, Protestants would often be burned at the stake, and Catholic laws would be enacted. If a Protestant was in charge, Protestant laws would be enacted, and Catholics would often be jailed or burned at the stake. Catholics and Protestants were fighting for decades as a result of this Reformation, and the Protestant Reformation itself was occupying England and Spain's attention as well. They really didn't have any time to worry too much about each other. They were too worried about what was going on in their own countries. Now, again, the Protestant Reformation involved constant fighting between Catholics and Protestants for numerous years, as Catholic monarchs would be in charge at one time and Protestant monarchs would be in charge another time. Who was getting burned at the stake and who was surviving and who was benefiting from the laws changed constantly. That was until this lady, Elizabeth I, a Protestant, ascended to the crown of England in 1558. Now, Elizabeth I would rule England for 45 years. And when you have someone in charge for that long, their religion is going to dominate the day. Now, since she was Protestant laws were enacted, a series of anti-Catholic laws were enacted, England became very, very Protestant in every way in its culture. But this also created an unforeseen problem. Now remember, they had formerly been an ally of the Spanish for the first half of the 1500s. The way the Protestant Reformation and Elizabeth's ascension to the crown would change that is because Spain was heavily Roman Catholic. Their monarchs had been on their thrones for a long time as well, ruling Spain from a Roman Catholic perspective. So the Protestant Reformation, with Elizabeth ascending to the crown as a Protestant, and the Spanish monarchs ruling as Roman Catholics, not only created waves in England itself, where Protestants were making the laws and Catholics were suffering from them, but also in Spain, where Catholics were making the laws and Protestants there were suffering from those laws. The result was that it put England in a direct rivalry with Spain. Too bad, since they used to be former allies. Now, this beef that the English Protestants and the Spanish Catholics had with each other would play out routinely in other areas of Europe as well. For example, Ireland, as you can see right up here, and if you look at the legend on the side of this map here, Ireland was predominantly Catholic, and they asked for Spain's help in keeping the newly Protestant England out of their country. Elizabeth, as you can imagine, didn't care for that, and she responded by planting Protestant landlords from Scotland and England all over the Irish Isle. Now, this is still a major problem in the modern day, and Spain didn't really help Ireland at all, but the fact that Ireland had asked them in the first place just added to the rivalry and fueled Elizabeth's distaste for the Spanish Catholics. Now, when you rule for 45 years, the nation is eventually going to adopt your personality. And Elizabeth ruled in a very bold way. That, therefore, was reflected in England's people. Many took to the seas to promote Protestantism and, as a side benefit, plunder Spanish ships and settlements. The most famous of these English sea dogs, as they were known, was Sir Francis Drake, pictured here. Drake was so successful that he netted a 4,600% profit for his investors, people who had provided him with the funds to do these voyages, one of whom secretly was Elizabeth I. While Sir Francis Drake was pillaging Spanish ships and settlements, Elizabeth was receiving some of the kickbacks from that, without anybody really knowing about it. The Spanish, of course, hated Drake, who had been the most prevalent of the English sea dogs to plunder their ships and settlements, and either just because she appreciated the profits or because she wanted to stick it to the Spanish, Elizabeth knighted Drake. He was no longer Francis Drake the sea dog, he was now a nobleman, Sir Francis Drake, and he was knighted on his ship's deck for everybody to see. The Spanish knew about this, and they protested to the English government that that should not happen, but, Elizabeth being Elizabeth, she did it anyway. Now, not every English captain was there to plunder and pillage Spanish ships and settlements. Others were actually trying to create English settlements of their own. This guy, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, attempted a colony at Newfoundland. Remember Leif Erikson? Yeah, Gilbert attempted a colony there in 1583. Keeping it in the family, Gilbert's half-brother Sir Walter Raleigh attempted a colony at Roanoke Island. Now, if you don't know where Roanoke Island is, it's located right there. It was off the coast of modern-day North Carolina, and the capital of North Carolina, Raleigh, is named after Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Walter Raleigh had attempted this colony in 1585, 2 years after his half-brother, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, had attempted the Newfoundland colony in 1583. The problem was that both colonies failed, with Roanoke becoming a particular mystery and becoming known as the Lost Colony. Why is it called that? Well, it's because nobody is totally sure about whatever happened to the settlers there. They just disappeared. Europeans showed up shortly after the formation of the colony with materials to help build the colony up, only to find that the settlers had mysteriously vanished. No one is totally sure what happened there, and theories abound to this day. Now, both of these attempts by the half-brothers in the 1580s took place before the settlement at Jamestown in 1607. So until Jamestown, the English weren't having a whole lot of success with their efforts at settlement in the New World. Spain, on the other hand, led by King Philip II, was succeeding greatly with massive profits. Now remember, Philip was a Catholic, and he had declared publicly that he was not just distasteful of the Protestants, but a full-blown enemy of Protestantism across the board. And he used many of the profits that they were building through their empire to build what was called the Invincible Armada of ships. The purpose was to invade England. And so the Spanish Armada, with 130 ships, sailed to England in 1588 and attempted to invade the English coastlines. Now, they were met by the British Navy, which was pretty formidable in its own right. It was there that the Spanish Armada realized that they had a problem that they had not anticipated at all. The ships of the Spanish Armada were very, very large and very impressive, but that also made them very cumbersome and difficult to maneuver in tight quarters against other ships. The English used smaller, more maneuverable ships that were able to get to the flanks and the sides and the backs of the Spanish Armada ships and create extensive damage. As a result, the Spanish Armada was crippled by the English, and then on top of everything else were scattered by a storm that came out of nowhere and forced their ships away from each other. Without the ability to back each other up, the Spanish Armada was fairly easily defeated, and this marked the quiet beginnings of the Spanish Empire's decline. From that point on, it would be England, not Spain, who was the master of the seas, becoming exactly what Spain had been before. Under Philip II, they had been a strong, unified nation under a popular monarch with a common religion in Roman Catholicism and a sense of destiny about their future. Well, England was now a strong, unified nation under Elizabeth I, another popular monarch, and a common religion in Protestantism, with a sense of destiny about their future as well. England was now ready to be the new colonial master in the world, and they would take full advantage. Okay, that's it for part one. Thanks for listening.